And as a kid, I honestly believed that there was a standard way for black people to behave or think, and any behavior outside of that box would grant you the unfortunate label of trying to act white. But what does that even mean? What is white behavior compared to black behavior? And most importantly, who's in charge of creating these rules? Black community leaders? Or better yet, why do I need someone to speak for me? Do other communities have leaders? And if so, who elects them? Despite having all of these questions, as a kid, I still had no desire to fit in, so losing my black card never fazed me. But as an adult, I now understand how self-limiting this way of thinking can be, because it suggests that everything from your self-expression down to your personal beliefs are already mapped out for you by a third party. And as this cycle continues with gatekeeping blackness, it poses the question, do issues within black culture truly stem from the white man system? Or is it possible that a lot of problems are
So, I spent a year watching black conservative YouTubers, and this is my takeaway. What do I mean? Hi, my name is Mel, and I am here at the Ebonscape inviting you to subscribe, like, and share this video. First, disclaimer. I consider myself liberal. That's important, I suppose. This is not necessarily a political affiliation, but it is something that I realize and that I would say is true of my political, social, and personal views. Liberal. It's always been important to me to see or listen to the other side and not simply take everything for word of mouth simply because it's coming from a certain perspective. Really, I started watching more YouTube since I've been working from home, just having it in the background, and then I've been introduced to more and more people. It started with my interest in fandom, and over the last year, a lot of the people in fandom spaces that I follow have been complaining more or less about what they see as toxic fandom.
From Justice League to Star Wars. Ooh. When Zack Snyder's Justice League hit HBO on March 18, it marked the culmination of years of long effort by a devoted group of DC fans to allow the director to finish the film. He left in 2017. Despite the positive, small but vocal segment of that fandom used social media to threaten and harass fellow fans as well as Warner Media executives they perceive as standing in the way of the cut. Oh boy. While so-called toxic fans take up an oversized place in the media's and the public's imaginations, Cinema Blend journalist Sean O'Connell suspects it's a relatively small contingent of fandom. If you ignore them, you are silently condoning what they do. I understand the need to have zero tolerance policy. In theory, the idea of toxic fandom is paradoxical. Fandoms are supposed to be places where people find a community, a place of inclusion. In practice, it has often been a different story. The same day that Lucasfilm shared its statement supporting Ariel, John Rogers, the screenwriter behind Halle Berry's Catwoman, resurfaced a blog post he penned in 2004, which he noted still applied today. In the post, he cheekily coined the term fundamentalists, noting that the behaviors of some fans mirrored the fundamentalist religions, such as men being dominant and the spurning of modern favor of a return to nostalgic vision of golden age that never really existed.
Toxic fandom, apparently, or as they're collectively known, the Fandom Menace, is apparently a collective group of fans, those of major science fiction, fantasy, speculative franchises, everything from the MCU to Star Wars to Lord of the Rings to Star Trek, Game of Thrones. These are largely readers, viewers, and fans, basically. And these are collectively known in certain spaces as the Fandom Menace, which is a take on the Phantom Menace. But the Fandom Menace, because apparently they've been terrorizing these fandom spaces, making it not welcoming for so-called wokeist or people on the left with progressive views about diversity, inclusion, women's rights, yada, yada, yada. So from there, I've been listening to a lot more of what the other side thinks. Like, why are these people so problematic? Isn't a difference of opinion a good thing? Isn't it a good thing to have differences of thought and disagreements? Why are these people so horrible? One of the YouTubers that actually turned me on to this belief, or turned me on to these Fandom Menace people, is a YouTuber named HeelsVsBabyFace, who made a video about a year ago called "Why Do Conservatives Like Star Trek?" This video really opened my eyes to the so-called Fandom Menace collective, as really it was never something I thought about even before. I never thought there was ever a problem with, at least I've never applied a political lens to fandom. It was just you were a fan and some things you like, some things you didn't like. But the video and subsequent follow-ups by Shivs and other YouTubers, including Jessie Gender, discussing everything from allegory to Star Trek's philosophy, basically delve into detail as to why Star Trek might be so popular to conservatives. I myself have dabbled a little bit into that discussion, and you can find videos here where I discuss the hoopla, if you want to use that safe word, regarding Star Trek and modern Trek, specifically what is sometimes condescendingly dubbed New Trek, particularly Star Trek Discovery. And it's been some interesting stuff going on. There's been some interesting stuff going on in the fandom. Star Trek Discovery is hated by people who would consider themselves traditional Star Trek fans. And really, I wanted to take a look at these people. Who are they? What do they hate about new Star Trek? What do they hate about Star Trek Discovery? And is this something that's workable? And by that I mean, I suspected it would be more nuanced than the other side was letting on, but I wanted to see for myself because that's just who I am. I don't like people telling me things. I like to experience it on my own. So I decided to start checking out different Star Trek reviewers from the other side, chiefly Nerdrotic, HeelsVsBabyFace, Critical Drinker, and a few others here and there who are adamant about their dislike for what's happening with their favorite franchises and comic books, and they're not happy. The general assumption about them is that they are evil, racist white men who just cannot stand that others are being accommodated in these traditionally white male spaces. The truth of the matter is it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's a little more complicated, and again, I highly recommend watching my video on Star Trek Discovery and why the character of Michael Burnham is so hated and why many people have so many problems with the franchise, myself included. Now, when I say it's a little bit more complicated than that, I actually do mean that. I do legitimately mean that because, you know, anyone who knows me knows I've been forever arguing for the position of nuance. Nuance, nuance, nuance. I've always said, give me nuance or go home. And what I see happening is that in this climate, you are either with us or you're with a terrorist. You're either very woke, progressive, or you are an evil fascist right-winger who is a racist, sexist, misogynistic pig. The truth of the matter is, I'm not getting that vibe from either side. And this leads to my I guess you can call it my dive into the world of the Fandom Menace. So I mentioned a few of them that I followed, specifically from those guys like Nerdrotic and HeelsVsBabyFace and Critical Drinker. And the truth is I find most of them humorous. I don't get the sense that these are people who are evil, vile, racist. These guys seem to have a casualness about them. I think these are just guys who like watching their favorite franchises and don't like it being messed with. You may say, well, they favor the status quo, which in turn favors white men. Of course, you're okay with that. But again, I think it's a little more complicated than that. I really do think it is. But I'm not going to put words into your mouth, but I will go into some of the things I noticed more specifically pertaining to Black conservatives, chiefly Gothix and Just Some Guy. Just Some Guy is very he knows his shit. He's a comic book nerd and he knows what he's talking about. He reviews comic books and fandom properties, IPs, and he gives his very critical highly critical reviews of comic books and other properties that are well catering to the woke mob if you insist on it. But I started watching a lot of these guys. I watched a lot of their videos and I've been doing so for over a year now. But what I've discovered about these guys is that these people are extremely witty, highly intelligent, and well-versed when it comes to their knowledge of fandom properties. You have the likes of Gothix, who you saw there at the beginning, who I think she got her start on Twitch as a kind of gamer, a reviewer, before moving on to YouTube. She rarely discusses nerd stuff, mainly politics and social issues, but what Gothix and Just Some Guy do is they approach nerddom or fan spaces from the perspective of Black conservatives. And wait for it, I don't find them off-putting. I don't disagree with everything they said, and I don't agree with many things they've said. My God, oh my God, I'm becoming conservative. You know, Candace Owens, like fellow Black conservatives, sometimes makes sense and other times she doesn't. Other times it's a little bit extreme, but to some extent I understand where many of them might be coming from. You know, as the old adage goes, every action will trigger an equal and opposite reaction. Black conservatives may take this hard stance because they feel they won't be heard otherwise. For them, denying the existence of, say, white supremacy, which Gothix does, and a few others as well, it puts them staunchly in opposition to Black victimization. For example, if white supremacy doesn't exist, then Black victimization doesn't exist. End of story. However, this is clearly not necessarily true. White supremacy does exist and racism does as well. To his credit, Just Some Guy has admitted that. He does acknowledge the existence of racism, real racism, as he would put it. But it's just that for many Black conservatives, what is considered racism these days, or white supremacy, is frivolous. It's completely frivolous. Ultimately, for them, refusing to acknowledge white supremacy or even that the death of George Floyd was cruel and inhumane contributes to a problem of denying the existence of white supremacy. And I've always said, nuance, people, nuance. Yes, white supremacy exists. Yes, racism exists. And yes, what happened to George Floyd was above, first and beyond inhumane and should not have happened, regardless of what he did. This is a civilized society, and that video should disturb everyone on a human, visceral level. But I get it. For many of these Black conservatives, they might not want to throw a bone to the Black victimization movement, if you want to call it that, because there is a movement of portraying Black people as victims. See the critical race theory debate, and that promotes the belief that Black people are basically victims and helpless, and nothing is their fault and nothing is their responsibility, which brings me back to a lot of these Black conservatives. Ultimately, at least on YouTube, but also on Twitter, what I really take away from them is they are frustrated, and in being in the minority, they just don't know how to fight back, or at the very least they're fighting back the best way they know how, by taking to platforms like YouTube, like Twitter, and basically using their wit, intelligence, and charm to push back against this notion that they are victims. Basically, they are frustrated with the inferiority complex that seems to exist among the Black population, especially from the United States, since both are American. Both Just Some Guy and Gothix are American. They do not want to be pitied, really no one does, and they do believe that Black people should take responsibilities for their personal failures and for all their, what I would put in quotation marks as air quote, pathologies. This is include Gothix has listed these as STIs, high teen pregnancy rate, homicide rates among Black people. These are not the faults of white people. These are the responsibility or lack thereof of the Black population. And this is really what they believe. They don't accept mediocrity among Black people. They acknowledge, at least some do, that racism and white supremacy and issues and conflicts and obstacles exist. What they don't do is indulge these things. They believe you work through them and you move on. Yes, things were terrible for Black people prior to the 1960s, but it's no longer the 1960s. For many Black conservatives, YouTubers more specifically, the goal that, or the tactic that they use is to ridicule Black race hustlers. They ridicule social justice warriors and throw their arguments back at them. Both Gothix and Just Some Guy give examples of how to fight back against the narrative coming from the other side, how to push back against social justice warriors, how to push back against people pushing that Black victimization agenda. Let's basically throw their arguments back at them. So, what can I say about most Black conservatives? Especially the ones that I've referenced here. Well, nothing I haven't said already. They're well-spoken, and they're highly intelligent and highly informed, even more so than their woke counterparts. They operate with facts and common sense, and most are frustrated that Black victimization is a thing and that Black mediocrity and inferiority are all just so easily accepted by those who don't want to take responsibility for failures in society. Most Black conservatives are also far more open to debate and less in their feelings than their woke social justice warrior counterparts. That means they are willing to debate you. You have an issue with them, they are willing to take it up with you and say, let's debate. This, I find, makes them far more open-minded than a lot of their woke counterparts that you may find on Twitter and other social media accounts and platforms. Those people don't debate. They state erroneous and often problematic things, and if you challenge them, they block you. They just block you. They block you and they don't want to debate you, and they're allowed to do this because they often exist on platforms run by white liberals who are sympathetic toward their viewpoint. This is very different from many Black conservatives who are not only in a minority, but who often operate as individuals and who exist on independent media platforms. So, after watching these channels for over a year, as well as some other lesser known conservatives from both Black and non-Black people. Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are on some of these guys. I will link below some of their YouTube channels for you to check them out on your own, and let me know where you stand. This is just my take. Until next time, subscribe, like, and share. Thanks, guys.